You should be. So why? Shit, what? Get that picture. We saw this works, but initially we count. The gardening. What it is, right? Good morning. My name is Benedict Dad. I am the proud member of class of 2026. Let us begin this program by acknowledging respect, the honor of the nation, the future look at buildings, or sexual pride with the Revolutionary Confederacy, the indigenous people and those that just man, so yes, we would have statements. As many of you are likely aware, today's lecture is part of a series of community events and celebrations, including the 20th annual Dr. Louis B. O'Donnell Video Summit in Tyler already today. I can relate it into the inauguration of Dr. Nwosu this Friday, September 27, at 1 p.m. in the event. Without further ado, it is my great honor to turn the program over to Senior Speakers Committee President, Dr. Peter Nwosu.
Thank you so much, Tigger, for those warm introductions. And I'm thrilled to welcome all of you to the first ever Sheldon lecture, a lecture on leadership and service. And indeed, my vision in establishing this event is for us to become, for this event to become a revered tradition at our university, a tradition that occurs during our Founders Weekend and features a prominent individual, one that has made significant contributions to our nation and our way of life. My hope is that this annual lecture, with its fireside format, provides our community with access to a distinguished speaker, as well as an opportunity to be part of a national conversation on leadership and service. And so let me introduce our inaugural Sheldon lecture speaker, Bob Moritz, an illustrious alumnus of SUNY Oswego's accounting program. Let's give him a warm welcome. And Bob joined the PricewaterhouseCoopers in 1985 in an entry-level position and rose to become the global chair of the international multi-billion-dollar professional services company, now known simply as PwC. He served as the global chair for 8 years, from 2016 until his retirement on June 30th of this year. And during this time, he managed the leadership teams, championed diversity and inclusion, set strategy, and enhanced the brand of PwC, a company that today spans 151 countries and includes more than 375,000 employees with $53.1 billion in gross revenues last fiscal year alone. His advice and insights are sought by government and business leaders around the world. And he regularly interacts on such global stages as the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, Climate Week in New York City, and the Global Solutions Summit, a World Policy Forum held in Berlin, Germany. We are thrilled to have him here with us today to chat, and he will be leaving here shortly after this convening to head to the United Nations General Assembly, which is a meeting of heads of state and governments around the world, and yet where he will be participating as well in those engagements about leadership and service. And so let's give again another one Laker welcome to Howard Stern. Class of 1985. Yes, yes, yes. So I want to focus our conversation this morning on a number of areas. One is your early life and the time at SUNY Oswego. And then I also want to speak about your professional career, leadership, service, which is a theme of our conversation this morning. But I also want to draw your attention, certainly you know this, about artificial intelligence, which is where and what that role, what it will play in a world that is constantly changing, certainly at PwC. About Edward Austin Sheldon, our founder. And then finally, I want to also touch on some current events, in particular, the upcoming elections, presidential elections. And indeed,
How much time do we have?
we will try as best as possible to get to those. What message you are taking to UNGA, the United Nations General Assembly? So, would you share a little bit about your childhood with this community? What was it like as a child growing up? What did you want to be? As you know, people always say, this is what I want to be when I grow up. So, what was it like for you?
So first, a huge thank you for allowing me to be the first one of these series of lectures that you'll host. I really appreciate it. And many people ask, why are you going back to Oswego? And again, it comes back to this concept of service, because I would not be in the position I am in now without the time that I spent here. And second, before I come to your question, Peter, a huge congratulations to you. This is your inaugural week. I want to wish you the best for the career that you have chosen now to be residing here in Oswego. You have a huge group of footsteps to follow in. When you think about the people that came before you, you've got a huge group of stakeholders that you have to deal with every day. And at least in my interactions, a huge amount of support for the future. So again, congratulations to you and best wishes for much success. So growing up, I was one of four. I was the oldest in my family. My father did not work. My father had a variety of jobs. By the time I was born, he was working in the mailroom at IBM and worked his way up through what I'll call lower management, so to speak. I was a kid that was an average student. I was interested in sports, baseball, what you would call football, soccer to the Americans here in the audience, and a bit of an introvert. As I think about my career path in that formative set of years, we lived in a wonderful neighborhood with lots of friends. We engaged a lot with our family, cousins, aunts, uncles. My mother's Italian, so you can imagine the Italian feasts on Sunday afternoon. And I would say it was the very first job I got, and I don't think I've told this story before. I worked in a women's clothing store in the soccer. And in that women's clothing store, it was my high school years, sophomore, junior, senior year, that I worked. It was a small family business. There was a guy by the name of Durbin, who was the head manager of the stock at the back. And he was a guy that knew everything. Everybody went to him. He was sought after. And I still remember thinking, wow, that's the person to emulate way back when. And it was interesting because over my career, I look back now and I think about those formative interactions, watching him and admiring him. Now, the other story I would tell you, working in that stock room, again, it was a family business, the daughter of the owner worked one season with us, and there was a really good group of people. There was about 6 of us in the back room. And I still remember one time we were talking about what the future holds for each of us. And at one point, one of the people in the room said, "Oh, Bob, he's going to have the average 2.5 kids, and the station wagon can probably be working at IBM. And I still remember that moment to this day, because none of us want to be, the average, so to speak. And what I am dying for is the opportunity to go back to be that person and list all the stuff that's since that, to say anything is possible. And I know when I've come up here on campus, Peter, my formative years, I had no idea what I wanted to do, where I wanted to be, other than to be an astronaut at the time I was growing up. Especially in those early years, call it ages 5 through probably 13, 14. And then 14 on, I just wanted to be a drummer in a band. Those were the two things I had on the top of my head before I ended up coming to this place, Oswego, and trying to figure out where I was going to go and what I was going to do. And it was in that senior year in high school, somebody taught an accounting class during lunchtime that I volunteered to go into because I liked math. I was better at math than I was anything else. And there was a girl in the classroom that I wanted to hang with, so that was the reason to get to that class. And sure enough, I still remember to this day, I would read the Sunday Times, and I read that partners in these accounting firms made $90,000 a year. And I was like, there I'm going. That's the place I want to go. And what was really interesting back then, I told this story before when I visited here, it was all about the money when I was in high school. And once I graduated in Oswego, it was anything but this. And every choice after that from a career perspective was all about optionality and career opportunities. It was never about the money, including the very first job I took. I took a job when I came out here for 30% less of the alternative job that was being offered me. Why? Because I thought I was going to go to that lower paid job, work for a couple of years, leave, and go to the other job. It gave me career optionality. And that was the thinking that went through my head at the time.
I want to spend a few minutes on that high school experience, those formative years. And you mentioned a number of individuals what had influence, and ultimately the choice you made to come to Surya Speak. Why Surya Speak at the time?
I worked at that place, that women's clothing store called Rudolph's. I didn't know if I wanted to go to college.
Was the place in the city?
It was in Westchester, so we were about 35 miles north of New York City.
Correct.
And I truly was thinking about taking a year, a gap year they call it today, and continuing to work at Rudolph's. I thought I was doing great at $4 an hour. And I still remember my father taking me out for breakfast. So back to your influence question. He was the one that said, look, you are the first of the family to have the potential to go away to school and to have a higher education. And he barely graduated high school. My mother graduated high school. The rest of the family, my grandparents, never even went to high school. So it was the opportunity at which he then convinced me to go take a look. We did the road tour across New York City. We couldn't afford any big schools. My grades weren't good enough. We hit 5 or 6 SUNY schools. I can still remember walking this campus, which would have been the spring of '81. And the thing that attracted me to this place versus anything else was a bright sunny day, which was such a fallacy with snow that but more importantly, the smiles on the faces of students. I still remember walking across the courtyard and bumping into people that seemed happy to be here. Compared to what I saw in Albany, what I saw in Buffalo, what I saw in Binghamton, etc. And that's what Kennedy got me here, was the gut feel of what I thought this place was about, which was a more of a family feel to it that looked like it was fun, as well as, for my father's benefit, educational, to learn more and to grow up as an individual. So that's what got me here at Oswego.
And then you made a number of faculty members. One of them I saw earlier today. You made a number of faculty members here who also were covered by the influence at the first. Went to the accountants group and he talked about the experience, what we did in school. Would you speak a little more about that professional journey, up in graduations, but yeah, certainly some of the experiences at the university here that inform those their choices.
To be super clear, so people know, the first 2 years, I did super well there for grades. The second 2 years, not so much. And the social life and the interaction started to happen. So the learning here, Peter, was great because it gave you a baseline of information that those faculty provided to you. That gave you the foundation to go learn more and continue the learning education once you left Oswego, went to the job, then the workforce. The second thing that I did here was, again, didn't have a lot of money, wanted to try to avoid loans. I ended up being an RA over at Scales Hall for 2 years. And again, that was probably my first technical leadership responsibility. Of being in charge of the first floor guys' dorm quarter and trying to figure out how to oversee, interact with, and help 30 other people that were on the floor. So that was another foundational item that was a forefront to the experiences I had at PwC. When I think about my time at PwC, the first 2 years were a wash, folks. I almost got fired. If you go back and read my evaluations, the first 2 years, I had no idea what I was doing. I was rated an underperformer, and if we had a bad economic cycle, I would not have had a job. And it wasn't until my third year that I finally got it, what my role was, what I was supposed to do. And to be fair and self-reflective, I didn't put the effort in those first 2 years. I was, again, working the assumption, I'm going to work 2 years here, get my experience, pass the CPA again, the test, become certified and leave, go elsewhere. And therefore the effort was there, the interest wasn't there. And it was in my third year, there was a specific project that I worked on that was exciting, it was new, it was different, nobody knew anything about it. And it was a chance to continue the education and learn. And once I learned, others then sought me out, which was interesting going back to the Durbin concept, is get that Wilton's clothing store. And I didn't know it at the time, but probably in the back of my head, subconsciously, there was this connection point of wanting to be sought after and being humble about it. But that was the very first time I got a chance to see and use things differently and be really interested, motivated, and inspired by now learning and then being somebody to share learning with others. So that was one piece. The second piece I would say was the interaction that I had while I was the RA. Meeting people from different parts of the state of New York, meeting people from people outside of New York, interacting with them, getting an understanding of what made them tick, what made them do what they did, how many of them were motivated to go to class or not go to class or party or not party, whatever the case may be, but trying to be there for them was another foundational item that ended up then helping me out at PwC. Because at PwC, I was an isolated person and an introvert for the first 2 years. The third year when that kicked in was when now I was looking at being sought after and then helping others and enable others. And that concept of service or servitude and Serbian leadership started to formulate then and only then. The other thing I will say, was in my fourth year at PwC. This is rare. They actually take you out of practice when you start clients, you do audit, tax, consulting works. They take you out of the practice and they take 4 people, put you in human capital. There we go. Yeah. And I was lucky enough, again, it had a lot to do with the career path, to be chosen to go do this. My job was to get to know 250 people in their second and third year at PwC, figure out what needs we had and play matchmaker. If IBM needed somebody to work for 100, or IBM service needed 150 hours of time from somebody, who could go do that? So I had to learn how to interact with the 250 people. What did you want to do? What did you not want to do? And then play matchmaker. And it was an unbelievable human psychology exercise in terms of what then you had to deal with. And the stuff I dealt with was amazing. Not only were you dealing with the work aspects of finding somebody to go work for the JP Morgan account or the Walt Disney account or the IBM account, you were dealing with who did something bad and were you going to deal with them? Were you going to fire them? How were you going to remediate them? You're going to deal with the superstars to keep them motivated. You got to know them personally when mom or dad passed away, and you had to be there because you were the first person they saw that they came in and said, I got to, go away from work for a while. So the personal aspect of that became really interesting in my career development, but I'm going to go back to the RA job. That gave me a chance to actually demonstrate maybe some of those skills at the time I was here last week.
And we have students in the audience listening. And you've been very candid in sharing that those first 2 years at entry-level position at PwC was the one with good tax. What advice would you give our students who are beginning? And suddenly the lessons to learn from that in terms of servant leadership, because the moment you began to give of yourself, then you became sought after. And that sought after continued and led you through the wonderful professional career you've had.
Here's, I not want to look back and, argue any regrets. Because if I didn't make those mistakes in the first 2 years, I wouldn't be the person I am today. Having said that, and I've said this occasionally to people that ask, first, when you first get out of college or at the university and go into the career, you've got to put forth the effort to do your job and do it well, to be trusted such that people will want to bring you along for the next opportunity. And that requires some effort, and that requires some extra work. Now, the second thing I will say is that when you get into that first, second, or third year, it's not about the quantity of work. It's about the quality of work that you do. And I do think making sure you're clear about what you want to do at that time, what options you have, what you want to get out of this job relationship in today's day and age is something you can and should talk about to your future employee. To make sure there's a two-way contract of the give and the get. And we always encourage people to do that more so. I wish I would have done that more so. The third thing I will say is when you do your job in delivering quality work, I don't care if you're a teacher, a marketing expert, an accountant, computer engineer, it doesn't matter. You don't always have to be in a learning mode. Do your job well, become that subject matter expert, but then learn more to give you more optionality, more career opportunities, etc. And the way you learn more is by the interactions that you have with other people. So for me, what I didn't do in the first couple of years, I had blinders on. I did what I was asked to do. I did it. I got the hell out of it. I didn't go and talk to another team on another audit and say, how do you do this so I can be better? I didn't go out and do any research to self-study in any way, shape, or form. I didn't listen when I was interacting with our clients. It went in one ear and out the other. I got the information I needed. I did my job. I moved on. Thank you very much. So doing the bare minimum doesn't create the opportunities through. Now, I would have said, if I did that particular job a different way, which would have been as follows, I would have gone out and talked to 15 other people. How do you do the job equivalent that I'm doing so I can learn maybe some differences? Oh, by the way, maybe I learned some things and then I go back and share it with the same people that I learned from so they can learn from me. All of a sudden now there's a team of people connected to you. And they're going to come to you. They're sought after. You're sought after, to your point, Peter. They're also a team of people that will follow you. So not only are you being sought after for the work you will do, you're being sought after for advice. You're being sought after for opportunities. You're being asked to be part of the team. You now create this ecosystem of people that you've helped, and they're going to help you in return. You just don't know when or how that helps to come and when you need it. But now you're into the relationship building game. And that's huge. Now, the last thing I'll say is if you're in the relationship building game, it takes effort. You got to stay connected with people. You got to put forth effort. You can't just assume you work with somebody, you know them, you help them, they help you, and 3 years later you don't see them again. And oh, by the way, you can pick up the phone and get to them. And I will tell you this one story, and I shared it many years ago when I was here. We had a person that was a leader at PwC. And somebody worked for him, and then the person left. They went to go work another job. And this person wanted to say goodbye to the person because this person was a mentor to him. This mentor had no time. Once that person decided to leave, he left. No time. They never connected. Till 10 years later. And 10 years later, here's the PwC person still there, who was the mentor of this person, pitching for a piece of work. He walks into the pitch, and sure enough, who does he see? The guy from 10 years old, who is now a super boss. Oh, by the way, the decision makers. Oh, by the way, it's clear, and you didn't get that piece of work. This guy, the person left us, called 5 times, and this person never returned the phone call. I'll never return the call. So you think about relationship building, and you say to yourselves, what does it take? Now, the way I would describe myself is I'm a big introvert. I'm not an extrovert at all, until the time's called to be one. About like today, if I'm speaking to 375,000 people at PwC, or not a client event or a UN event, it doesn't matter. But in my off time, I am the introvert, the guy that's actually quietly behind the scenes trying to connect people, enable people do the things that I do. What people also don't know about me is in that enablement, I am connecting family, I am connecting friends, I am scheduling time for us to go have a Super Bowl party together or go on a ski trip together. And again, thankfully, because of my time in Oswego, because of my time at PwC, I'm fortunate enough to give back. And that's on me. And many times my wife will say, well, if you didn't make those phone calls, do you think they would be calling you? And you have to ask yourself that question, because if the answer is yes, then they are definitely worth the investment. The answer is no, maybe it's time to think about a new friend. That's your relationship. So it's got to be two-way with your company, but back to advice, and it's got to be two ways with the relationships that you create. But again, good work, quality work, go above and beyond the extra mile, figure out the networks, keep those relationships going and the opportunities.
And you have managed those maybe wonderful leadership qualities and then moved on to become the global chair for a multi-billion-dollar entity that spans the globally one to what countries over $375,000 employees. Now, one of these kids just talked to us about what some of the challenges of leadership that multi-billion-dollar entity leaders face, what promises you would like. Why would anyone want it?
I was fortunate enough in my stint here at PwC to go work in Japan for 3.5 years. I didn't speak Japanese, I didn't like sushi, I didn't have a passport, but it was an opportunity to go do something different and develop relationships with people in a foreign country that at the time I went, which was in the 90s, the people I were interacting with, parents suffered through World War II and therefore didn't like Americans. It was an opportunity to interact with people at PwC while I was there who couldn't speak English. Their education system in Japan at the time was you're taught to read and write it but not speak it, which is also interesting. You're also going into a country that respects tremendously people with titles and age. I went there at the age of 26. My job was to question what people did as part of the audit. And my job was as well to ask questions to give them for advice. My very first couple of weeks, Peter, I went to a meeting questioning a loan officer that gave a loan. They never paid back any principal or interest, and I was trying to understand why. The person spoke Japanese. I had to bring a translator. I walked out of the meeting, and I said, oh, that was a bad meeting, I sensed. And the translator said, yeah, Moritz-san, very bad meeting. 3 strikes and you're out, Moritz-san. You were questioning his authority, you were young questioning his authority, and you're an American young questioning his authority. And I'm saying to myself, how am I going to do my job in a country like this with a totally different culture? On top of that, the next day I went to go see the CFO, and I said, oh, his name was Roy. Suzuki-san and I had a really bad meeting. He goes, oh yeah, we already heard. I was like, great, I'm going to get fired by the time I'm done with this. And Roy, the CFO, looks at me and goes, Bob, Suzuki-san speaks perfect English. He just didn't want to speak it to you. Peter, that was my first eye-opening experience relevant to a global organization. Understanding culture, understanding what motivates, understanding language, understanding social and business norms is huge in the jobs. Now jump forward, if I can, tell the rest of the story. When the tsunami hit Japan a number of years ago, and the tsunami hit the nuclear power plant in Fukushima, the whole country was at risk. And I was in New York, I was running one of our business units at the time, and every day, every night at 12 midnight, 12 noon their time, we would get on a call with them to talk about, are you safe, is everything okay? And for all the expats, do you want to come home? Because we will get you out. If you feel you or your family's not safe. We had a value at PwC, teamwork, integrity, duty of care. And I remember about a week after the earthquake happened, I flew into Japan. And the leader of Japan pulls me aside and says, hey, Bob-san, can we talk for a moment? This doesn't feel like the PwC experience that we would expect. And my natural reaction is, what are you talking about? Like, we were on the phone from 12 midnight till 2 in the morning. Like, checking in, make sure everything's okay. And he says to me, he goes, your first priority was your expats and getting them out unsure. What about the rest of the Japanese here? Second thing he says to me is, the government told us we were safe. We respect what the government says. You were doing something alternative to the government. Again, another wake-up call of how do you do business. The third example, and I'll stop, Peter, was the COVID. When COVID happened, you got to remember I'm in a global job, and I travel 80% of my time outside of the U.S. When COVID happened, we shut down. I still remember I was in the UK in February when it was one of the last flights out, going out of the UK. I got back home, and the next week we were doing video conferences with every office. I was checking in, just lining up call after call after call after call. And at one point I got to our India office. And our India office has about 30,000 people in it. And I could tell there was something wrong with the leader. I started every call, how are we doing? How are things in the office? Let's talk about our people. But he was off. There was something wrong. We talked for a half hour, I left. Went up to the next call. It was 3 days later, I found out his uncle had died the day before I talked to him due to COVID. And I'm saying to myself, you idiot. What you need to do is understand the context of when you're talking to these people, of what they're going through that particular day, week, or month, before getting into then your leadership responsibility. So that caused me every single time they're out there, Peter, to start my conversation. Let me start with you. How are you doing? How are you and your family? And if you got the okay, then we should move on to the PwC people, then to our clients. If you're not okay, we're never coming off of what help do you need. And that was huge lessons learned along the way that got me to understand better. Living in Japan, but getting called out by the Japanese. And oh, by the way, we have a great relationship because I lived there. They respected me, I respected them. But they called me out appropriately so with the earthquake. And then they'll learn it from COVID. And the last thing I'll say, Peter, is I can't lead 375,000 people alone. So I've got to have the right team around me. So what I learned very early on was actually what one of the big accounting firms failed. Well, they say thanks story for later. But you've got to be more transparent. You've got to talk more. And again, being the introvert, I'm not comfortable with that normally. But what I learned to do was just tell stories. So I would tell the COVID story. I would tell the Fukushima story. I would tell the Suzuki-san story time and time again for my leadership team to hear it so they can then learn from me as well. Because it's all about the team. It's not about the I, it's about the we. And that's huge. And that's some of the, what did you learn, how to apply it, but also how did you apply it and get others to learn from you and then hopefully apply it as well.
Absolutely. And what you really talked about is about the role, culture, in the, certainly one that is very one of the importance, even more so, not just in terms of managing a global entity that has branches around the world, where cultures, but also even for us in the United States, where diversity is also key. And so in that leadership framework and mindset, culture becomes hugely important. How people engage with others, that they have a computer relationship with common forces in that leadership and service roles. I wonder, as you have worked with many global, the World Economic Forum of Davos and other leaders you like focused, whether you've seen any of the sort of traits in terms of strong leaders that transcend nationality, race, industry, gender, or other factors, and what makes a leader effective?
There's a lot to unpack there. First, I just want to touch on your culture point for a second. I think at times people misinterpret culture. Culture is, in essence, behaviors that are consistently demonstrated across the organization. And it's derived from the individual behaviors of, in our case, the 375,000 people. So getting to an acceptable and understood expectation of behaviors is super important. And I will share with you at PwC what we did. We actually did an exercise around our purpose. What is PwC good at? Was the world being, and in the intersection was our purpose statement. We actually crowdsourced our behaviors. We went out to the time 250,000 people and said, what are your personal behaviors that are most important to you? What do you think the behaviors of PwC are today? And what do you think they need to be tomorrow to achieve that purpose? And through that, we did two things. We got a lot of input, but we actually got a lot of buy-in to then the expected behavior. So it was a good exercise in achieving that. So now come back to your point on behavioral aspects of what I see from other leaders. And I'm going to say, I don't think there is anything that brings it together by geography or race or anything else. What I will say, it comes back to the definition of leadership. And that people understand this. And here's mine for what it's worth. Leadership is about enabling others to be better and to potentially be better than they even thought themselves. And that can go to individuals, a CEO of an organization, a president to a country. It can go to a corporation, a corporate entity. It can go to a team and a team brand. And that concept of leadership is their job, when they really understand it well, is to enable the success of the individuals around them and hopefully therefore contagiously understood and felt by others in these concentric circles. In order then to be a good leader, I would say there's three key elements that I've seen in anybody that I would say has been a great leader. Number one is understanding that concept of leadership. Second is a willingness to listen more than speak. We've given 2 ears and 1 mouth proportionally for that reason. And third is the willingness to actually do something with it and apply that learning when you're listening all the time. Because it's one thing to learn it, but if you don't use it and change your own behavior or force others maybe to change their behaviors. So maybe not force is not the right word, but understand their behaviors and what they're doing. That's a problem. And here's where I have seen bad leaders, Peter, just to the other the counter side of that, which is, I know everything and this is where we're going. That's a problem, because I don't think you understand the ecosystem that you're operating with, because you've got that sole vision. You have to bring people along for the ride. And again, enable them to be successful in the long run. The second is those that never listen and just speak a lot, because then it's us understanding their way of thinking, but no way shaping potentially their future way of thinking. And the third is those that listen, but never do anything about it. So it's learned, but not applied. And that's the worst of all, because, Kelly, that's a missed opportunity for work and for the people around us. So I would say in politicians, CEOs, academics, it's never back to their upbringing or their geography or who they are or what they are. It's more about how they've applied those concepts that really, to me, has enabled them to be great leaders and learn from, and other leaders are equally learning from them as much as they learn from the people around.
You've talked about, you used the term, you need the multiple times, Bob. And you said the leadership is enabling others to be better. But what you've also done in terms of enabling others to be better is develop. Well, and like when you talk, you mentioned some of it was elements of developing a team, getting them to understand what it is expectation about. Want to stick to that development teams are so important to build them a better.
Yeah. As you think about this development and the ability to enable, I think there's a opportunity for inspiration to give people hope. That's an aspect of it. There's an enablement to give people an opportunity to grow and learn and become better. And then there's the opportunity to sponsor them. Not mentor them, sponsor them. And I want to be clear in this, and I've said this, I think, in some of my previous visits of the others. Mentors are people that give you advice. Sometimes when asked for, sometimes they're not they ask for. Sponsors actually put forth their personal capital, their time, their energy, to enable the opportunity for your success while giving you that advice. And that advice doesn't even have to be spoken about. It could be emulated by, watch what I do, rather than do what I said. And that to me is a huge opportunity. So this enablement and development has got to have a bit of all three. Like I said, I'm an introvert and I grew up, first one to get educated in the family. For the students in the audience, I shared this with some of the people that I met this morning. I was in your shoes. I didn't want this job. I never thought about having this job and this opportunity. But the fact that I've met presidents, gone to the UN department, been to the Oscars a couple times, handed out the Best Picture to Michelle Obama Award to the White House. Holy heck, I was at a swing up. Right? I mean, destiny. My grade point average is a hell of a lot worse than yours was. All right? So that's a part of the development piece. It's the inspiration to give hope. It's the opportunities and then the development. Now, my thinking and development, I thought about leadership teams that I created around. There were three criteria I had, Peter. One was, could they do the job or grow into the job that I'm asking them to do? Number one. And there was always and mostly a grow into the job, because the jobs I was asking people to do, you're never going to find the ideal person that 100% can do that job. Second, were they additive to the team? I needed them to be a team member. They had to be part of the team. They had to make the team better. Not just me, but they were part of the orchestra that we were trying to create. And the third thing, if I give them this job opportunity, will it create 4 or 5 future opportunities for them in totally different ways? And I still remember, again, another story. I asked a woman to come into my leadership team and be the diversity officer. And I made her a direct report to me. And we're in the very first meeting. This was a tax professional down in our Texas office. And she's in her first meeting, and I notice as I'm watching the room as we're debating an item, she's not saying anything. I get up and pretend to go get a drink. And I hand her a piece of paper. And I said, I know you've got ideas and reactions about this. You're not in the room because you're the diversity leader. You're in the room because you're a leader. Don't hesitate to jump in with your ideas. I'll give you another 30 minutes, and if not, I'll call it. And it was that time when she read it, and sure enough, she jumped right in, very informed and additive to the conversation. And she came to me afterwards and she said, thanks. And I said, look, I want you to understand why you're on the team, because I know you can grow into the job, I know you can do it, you can be added to the team, and oh, by the way, I want this to be a job-creating opportunity to leap forward like 3 or 4 times ahead of yourself. Because if you went on this incremental trajectory, you're going to end up here. But I gave you this job so you can be here. And since that day forward, she still was unbelievable. But she didn't minimize herself. And this is the point I will say is, when people get into these opportunities, and it could be in a team project for the students that are here, it could be in a club, don't minimize yourself. You've got something to offer or you've got something to learn. Both require you to engage, got engaged. So the development, Peter, to your point, has been always how, again, should we think about giving these people the right opportunities. There is times where you've got to help develop them even more so, a particular skill set that they need, or maybe a behavioral challenge. And at that point in time, you want to say to them, listen, I want to get you to coach, or I want to send you to a course, because I see 95% of the picture, but I can see 150% better if you had these 2 or 3 other things. So talent management, hugely important, on a campus, in a classroom, or otherwise. The thing I will say is sometimes people believe that they're actually being negatively viewed rather than positively viewed. There was one guy I took out of a job when I was in the U.S. I took him out of a job, a business unit, to get him a totally different position. And he didn't talk to me for 5 minutes after I gave him that position. He did. And I finally went to him, I said, what's up? He goes, you clearly don't like me and don't think I'm capable. And I said, no. I'm trying to round you out because I think you could be my successor. And he's like, what? I said, yeah, you're on my short list of 5 people right now that I'm trying to round out and give you totally different issues. I know you can run a business. And oh, by the way, if I give you another business, I know you can run that business. I'm giving you these soft skill opportunities. I want you to run new Apple. I want you to run marketing. I want you to run our client relationship program that requires you to develop totally new and different skills. So telling people that you are appreciated, wanted, and valued is equally as important to the development of them themselves.
We've talked about leadership. The other piece of this is service. You mentioned sponsorship in mentorship. And I want to connect this particular question to our family as well, Sheldon. For some clients, there was 2 answers. But first, could you speak to the difference between the 2? And you mentioned the idea of sponsorship. How does this leadership lead to the service piece? And connect the dots for us in terms of a role that I found in these 2 concepts.
Again, with a story, and again, some of the audience might have heard this say, of course. In 2001, Arthur Anderson was another accounting firm that had a problem because they did 2 bad audits, and I think management did a lousy job of interacting with the government. The government, in essence, forced out of business. And around the world, probably 150,000 people lost their jobs because they had nothing to do with that decision by management. And it was not the issues that they had a failed audit, it's that they had a failed leadership team making the wrong decisions. And it was at that time I wasn't running the U.S., I was at a lower level of management. It was a wake-up call saying, wow, I've got a huge obligation here. And my line after that was, either I should be fired or I should go to jail before the firm goes down if I was ever in that position. But that comes with a huge obligation. And an obligation is threefold. Obligation to the organizations that you're associated with in leadership, obligations to the stakeholders of those organizations, and obligations to your families. Those are the three obligations that become front and center. In that second bucket of stakeholder relationship, that's when serving leadership becomes super important. You're in a fortunate position to be in a viable business or in a political position or a government position or whatever, and you've been fortunate enough to get there. I am going to always argue you should be fortunate enough and willing to give back and serve the larger ecosystem. And so that's why climate became important to me. That's why diversity became important to me. That's why youth and education, the thing I'm going to talk about next week, or tomorrow rather, is important to me. It was the opportunity to give back because you're in this position. And oh, by the way, in this position, you had tools and assets and people that could do the same. When I was running the U.S., we made a decision coming back to Sheldon. We know the lower education system in the United States has to be improved. We knew at the time of the financial crisis back in 2008, 2009, financial literacy was not good by the people that went out and took out the loans. We knew the world had a problem. We knew we had, in the U.S., 50,000 people that knew finance. We made a decision to say, let's go teach teachers how to teach financial literacy in grade school. Let's bring them together and actually teach them how to teach. Let's actually go in the classroom and ask our people to volunteer to teach while in the classroom to help the neighbor. Problem, possible solution. And that became, therefore, the stakeholder management and the concepts of servant leadership and giving this back. And when I think about what he did here, it was to create the environment for learning, create the environment for people to go out of Oswego and teach, and hopefully have those learnings applied, and therefore, again, go to those concentric circles and make the world better. And that's where I come back to today. What's, I think, sometimes missing people, Peter, is people are forgetting the leadership obligation, not to the company, but they're forgetting the leadership obligation to the stakeholders that are so important. And that's becoming more and more important because there's not only a doing good aspect of this, there's just a survivability and a sustainability of being in business that's important. So there's a business reason for doing this now, which a lot of people, I'm like, amazed don't get. If you're not willing to be better in your communities in which you're living as a corporate, at some point in time, the community will revolt against you. You can't hire, you can't sell your products, you can't do what you need to do. You're out of business. So there's a business reason behind it. And I do think today's day and age, different than when I grew up, that can happen in an instant. I share a story with the CEO. It just, again, there's a difference between the academics and the faculty that are here versus students. Kraft Food, many of you will know the name of the organization, they make Capri Suns. The CEO would tell you the story how stakeholder management has changed over the last 30 years. When mom and dad bought a case of Capri Suns to the soccer field to give to the kids at halftime, and one of the bags had a little bit of mold on it, mom and dad would be upset and write a letter to the corporate office. The corporate office would send a message in a letter saying, I'm super sorry. To make sure we keep your loyalty, I am going to send you a case of month for the next year. Jump to today. Social media, click, I take a picture, I send that around the world, your market cap goes down 10%. And that's the reality of stakeholder management today. So there's a doing good and a doing it for business, and people need to understand the power at the end. That becomes so important when you think about serving leadership.
We have a few more minutes left, and I want to just get to 3 more quick questions that we could questions, and then we turn it back to the audience. because I know that they will have some questions as well. You mentioned social media, but I want to tie that to technology. The piece, if you can provide a very quick response, the role of AI and how that's changed the world, in particular, the work at PwC as well. And the last two questions I have will come to current events, as you can. Was that the question?
Look, I am more half full than half empty on AI and the benefits of generative AI. I think it will help accelerate research and advancements in the medical field. I think it will actually have the potential to help as we think about the upskilling of people around the world and the need for that, more so for them to be better here, looking ahead. It clearly comes with a lot of risks. The upside is bigger than the downside risk potential. The founder of OpenAI said yesterday he believes that in the next 4 to 5 years we'll get to a level of super intelligence by the machines. I don't know if we'll get there. The world tends to be overly optimistic on the time horizon when we actually make these major advancements, and they tend to underestimate the longevity of the impact. And I think generative AI in particular is going to be one of those things where it is going to change strategy. To your point on PwC, here's where the change is going. And it gives you a sense of the pace of change. We spend billions each year on audit methodologies and technologies. We agreed this past year or 2 years ago, to work with Microsoft to co-develop this and embed in some of their AI. 6 months before I retired, our team went out there, and the amount of advancement in AI that Microsoft found was so big and so eye-opening that our previous budget process, which was how much we're going to spend the next 5 years, which we just agreed with them, went through out the window and said that whole budget process is a fallacy because the world's changed so dramatically in the last 6 months. And it caused us to move to quarterly reviews now, rather than annual and 3-year budget processes. And I think that effect is going to have on universities like this one, businesses, politics, governments, etc. around the world. And that's what I think is such a positive opportunity. And the last thing I'll say, Peter, is it is not going to be one that benefits just those who create it. It's going to benefit those who learn how to use it. And that's the big thing now in education. I think learning how to use it is going to be super important to enable the future, whether you're a student today looking for getting through the university, get a graduate, or the faculty here, that learning how to use it, I think is going to be full support, particularly in the next 2 years.
Thank you very much for that response. To your thoughts on 2 current events I've mentioned, the upcoming elections, and speak to us about why it's important for our students in particular to show to vote. And then, of course, what advice are you planning to give to all leaders that are gathering at the United Nations General Assembly?
Yes.
Look, on the election, you're less than 60 some odd days away. So everybody in the audience, your right as a U.S. citizen, assuming you are one, is that you benefit from the rights that would be created prior, and you are invested in the future of this country. And one of those rights was the right to vote on whoever you want to be president. Please, please, please exercise that privilege. Sign up, register, and vote. Point number 2, do the research. Do the research in terms of the individuals, what they stand for. That goes into the policies that they believe are most important, their behaviors and how they choose to lead, and what you believe they will do as a leader. And again, I'm not going to say one side or the other, but take the time to get educated. 3rd, decide what's most important to you. When you do, then vote. Because I can tell you right now, I'm not happy with either candidate on all of the policies and all of the behaviors. But for the things that I am most interested in, most worried about, and then most focused on, that will have to make educated dictate that where I go. And I know I'm not going to get the perfect candidate in whoever I vote on. And this goes back a little bit to leadership here. You can't wait for perfect. And oh, by the way, they'll learn along the way. Last point, be super careful on the education. I do think the media organizations have spun this thing like it's never been spun before. I think artificial intelligence, this is a downside risk to it. There's also created some of the problems there. Fact versus fiction is a problem in terms of what's going on. The other thing you have to keep in mind is that whoever ends up being president, some of the stuff they promised, it's just like a recruiting exercise. They promised it, but it's not going to happen because it's got to go through Congress. We have checks and balances in this country. So it's going to be something less than whatever they promised. So when you think about that education, and then think about what it may end up being in reality, and then think about what's most important, take the time in the next 60 days to make that decision. And for those that are already decided, I would just ask, open your mind up in the next 60 days, just make sure you're 100% confident. For those that are undecided, take the time and listen. But don't be swayed. It's your choice and only your choice. You're the one that goes to the voting booth. You're the one that checks the box on that ballot registration. But please, 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 get engaged. I will say, as I look at the world we're in today, and this goes a little bit to your latter question, I'll come to in a second, Peter. For the students in the audience in particular, the next 5 to 8 years, I think are going to be one of the more challenging ones for the U.S. operating in the global world and delivering. That is going to set the stage for the next big. And the students in the room, that's you. That's you. So thinking about this, engaging in this is super important. And years ago at PwC, we did a study, Peter. What's the role of the U.S. in the world? We have 4 scenarios. Will it continue to lead the way it has historically? Will it lose its leadership position and someone else will take it? Will it run the regions, or will it have to share its responsibilities? We did that study 15 years ago. We didn't come up with an ideal answer. We actually said it's probably going to have to be a combination of all 4. But you're at this inflection point now where the world order that we live in is going to get pressure tested in the next 5 to 8 years, a big time wedding. From what I see, what I know, in the interaction that would be important. And therefore, this election is super important. I just ask you to please engage. I think. Andrew, what advice? Yeah, so the UN General Assembly is here this week. The meeting I'm going back to for tomorrow is around youth and education. We're meeting with a bunch of prime ministers and presidents and educators and then a group of affiliates that are there that do good work in years education around the world. What this particular UN agency that I am part of is called Generation Unlimited is focused on how do you get education into the youth ages between 8 and 24 around the world with the idea of upskilling or skilling about 1.5 billion to 2 billion people that don't have the access to be fit for purpose going forward in the world that we see ahead of us. The ask is, very specifically, there are things that we are doing well right now in certain parts of the world. We are not learning from them and scaling them fast and efficient, and you need to do that faster. Everybody wants to do their own things in their own silos and control their own destiny. That's a pretty stupid answer. When you think about working on a cross-border basis and trying to solve this problem, it is probably one of the biggest issues when you think about everything else that we have to deal with as society. So the ask is for us to actually commingle more so together rather than a country do its thing over here, here, and here. We work, PwC, Microsoft, and a whole bunch of other companies, including SAP, are coming together. We're now on the board of this to actually work with this. And tomorrow we'll announce a few new programs, a few worldwide programs. What we're trying to get is the incentive for people to work so together on this particular topic. The focus is on youth, women and girls, green, and digital. That's the 4 elements of the matrix, Peter, that we're trying to fit particularly into your team.
Thank you very much. Let's give Bob Moritz a clap.
All right. Thank you, President Nwosu and Bob.
someone's got to start. So if you are going to ask a question, just name your roles and where you're from. Just so I have it.
Good morning. It feels good to be here. My name is Alexander Sari. I'm coming from West Africa, Ghana. And I think I'm embodying the color of the school. I'm in green. Well, thank you so much for this lecture. I am so ingrained with what you said, and it's reflecting, and it's like it keeps going through my mind like a song in my ear. Anyways, I want to ask, what are some of the most effective leadership styles in today's dynamic and diversity environment?
The question in here was, what are some of the key leadership traits, characteristics, and behaviors in today's world? I'm going to go to one I've already said, which is the willingness to listen. I'm going to go to a second, which I think we're talking about, which is the willingness to compromise. We can argue over past U.S. presidents. The one thing I will say with Bill Clinton, who I had a chance to meet, interview, and spend some time with, he was great at engaging with people from all sides and all ways of life in all parts of the world, and also interacting with them and making them feel special and heard and listened to. He was also great at the art of compromise and getting something done. So that's an important one too, because you can't wait for perfection. The last piece I will say is that in today's day and age, you have a choice. You either leave it to the fire or you run away from the fire. And I'll share with you two pieces of advice I've gotten in my career that still stick with me. I think are applicable in today's day and age. Number one is the first leadership role I ever got formally. An individual I knew came to me and said, "Bob, when you think about you now in this leadership role, are you going to run into the fire or are you going to run away from the fire? And you're going to have to decide that each time of what to do." And I didn't want to let's jump into it. When Russia-Ukraine happened, we had offices and we got people in both locations around the world. Man, that was ugly, but my thing was not to avoid it. My thing was, all right, let's get them all on the phone call and let's have the debate the world. One of the worst and the hardest conversations I've ever had, but I'd rather have it than not. The second piece of advice along these run to the fire concept was another partner came to me and said, "Every day I see you from now on," and I apologize for what I'm going to say, I'm going to say what he said to me. "I want you to tell me who you're pissed off." He goes, "Because your job is not to make everybody happy. If you make everybody happy, you are going to the lowest common denominator, and that's the easy stuff, which people underneath you should do. Your job is to deal with the hard stuff, and you're going to have to take positions. And in taking those positions, you're going to hear the worst and the best. You're not going to make everybody happy. So if your job is to make everybody like you, this is not the job for you. Take a position and explain why you did it. Explain what the benefits were. Explain what your intention was. Give people context. Do a better job of communicating what you're doing and why, but don't minimize it down to the lowest common denominator. I think that's so important in today's day and age. And when you look at different topics that have come up, you can see at a corporate level, some people duck in their head and other people rise above. You can see the political line, "Oh, I don't want to go near that one." Others step right into the fire. So those would be the couple pieces of advice. One in the back.
Yeah, I'm Ashraf Atiyah, the Chair for Marketing and Management and Professor of Marketing. Thank you so much for always for being so inspiring.
So one thing that I apologize, the sound isn't great from the back, so we have a lot of echo.
Okay, I'm Ashraf Atiyah, the Chair for Marketing and Management. Thank you so much for being a wonderful alum. We're very proud of you and being here with our inaugurated president. You know, like that's a wonderful event. You know, you are going to the United Nations, which is great. And that's, you know, you are going for youth empowerment and, you know, so maybe two messages for all the turbulent world that we are living in now. One is empower the youth. We have been seeing what has been happening in Brazil and in Bangladesh these last few months, in so many places. So you speak about to prime ministers and presidents. So ask them to empower the youth, freedom of expression, freedom, and democracy. That's one thing, if it's possible. And like, be human when we treat each other. That's really the key. We see a lot of, especially from the leaderships in different parts of the world. So it would be wonderful to, and thank you so much for, speaking about voting and, like that's very important for our youth. Whether, like you like the candidates or not, do your research, as Bob said. So if you'd like to reflect on that too, please.
Thank you very much. I'll tell you one story on the youth piece for a second. Again, I've been blessed to have the career that I had and all of the different events that came through it. Part of that was the hard work, the doing above and beyond, being sought after. Part of it was luck. I grew up in PwC working on the financial services side of our business. So I audited and consulted with banks. When I first became a partner, I became a partner relatively early. I was asked to go work on the JP Morgan account. And the CEO at the time went to the management of JP Morgan and said, "Do you really want him to be your partner, your audit partner? He's really young." Now think about that for a second. My boss's 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 boss is questioning whether they want me to do the job. So when we think about diversity, there was an age and a youth piece associated with this, because I was really young. And their response was, "We tried to hire him 3 times. And he started to stay with you guys. Of course we want him as a partner." So the client overruled my boss's 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 boss to let me be the audit partner on that job. Had I worked on Chemical Bank or Chase, which are banks for the students in the audience that probably don't even know the names, but all JP Morgan Chase under Jim Dunn right now, that was an older group. I'd never have that opportunity because that group did want the old guy, which is now me, but the old guy with the gray hair. I just happened to be lucky enough to work on JP Morgan. So back to your youth point, we are missing an opportunity to give them the voice. So this Generation Unlimited thing that I do, it is the world's largest public-private partnership with youth at the table. Youth around the board. We found 5 people around the world that are under the age of 25 and put them on that board. So their voice, they're not just a beneficiary, they're driving us to what we need to do differently. Now we part of the message. They'll see it live rather than speak it, but we'll talk about it as well. So thank you for the comments.
Hello, sir.
I'll answer anything and everything, so fire away.
Hello. My name is Emmanuel Duke, and I'm an MBA student here. Firstly, I just want to say it's a very great honor to see you in person. The last time I saw you was on Wikipedia, and I had to double check you literally finished from here. Yeah, because there's always that idea of if you want to get to the top 4, you have to come from an Ivy League college. And it wasn't Cornell, it wasn't Columbia, it was Oswego. So I'm very proud to say that a lot of times. And secondly, last semester you had an online event, and I want to tell you a lot of people are still talking about it. I'm also the vice president of the investment club here, and your name still comes up with the freshmen, and they're like, "Is it this? Is it that?" And we're like, "Yeah, sure it is," But my main question here is is a 2-part question. I would like to know what was going through your mind during the tax situation from Australia when the government was, given everything they were having. I was at the airport in London and your face was there. And just what was going through your mind as a leader? A very powerful nation is saying big words, and you have a corporation that has a lot of investment on the line and a lot of reputation as well, and those are really big reputation, And lastly, your successor, I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher the name, Mohammed Kunde. Yeah, was he part of your top 5? Why was he your successor? How did it get here? And again, I'm fanning, but it's very good to see you.
So for context, what happened at PwC in Australia was a number of years ago, a partner was working with the government on creating new tax policy. He signed confidentiality agreements, so he was not supposed to share that information. He inappropriately shared that information with some clients. 5 other partners got involved, and they tried to turn it into a marketing opportunity, i.e., we have inside knowledge, and we gave advice to clients that was inappropriate and unacceptable as we think about our code of conduct and all the aspects with it. The feelings I had were as follows. First, our local leadership team should have thoroughly investigated years ago when it happened and didn't thoroughly investigate it enough to find out what really happened and hold people accountable. Mistake number 1. Mistake number 2, and you would not have seen this, was our CEO in Australia, when government and the public pushed back, minimized the issue. So go back to my point on stakeholder management, because I saw the press article that says, oh, Tom said this, and my mindset was, what the hell? That's not what I expected to be. So I ended up pulling it literally that night from Australia with time zone difference. That was a Wednesday. By the time we got to Friday, I basically told the local board, he either resigns, you fire, or I fire. Because he and his certain people around him lied to me about what was also going on. So now we're back to inappropriate investigation of something that was wrong back then, as well as now inappropriate behavior by leadership. I still remember talking to the CFO of Google. She's now become beyond CFO. Her name is Ruth Borat. And she said to me, she goes, I know you. I bet you probably feel as if you have been personally assaulted. And the answer is that's exactly how it felt, because I expected more of our leaders. And I expected truth. And unfortunately, like I said, the difficulties that we're going through as a country and as a society right now, you've got bad behavior where lying is the norm. Cheating is the norm. People get ahead by doing bad, stupid things that years ago were unacceptable. Now, for some reason, they become more acceptable. So that's why you saw when that happened, I made the statement, sorry, you're getting fired. It's rare that I'm going to reach my boiling point and say you're fired. But when a leader lies and obfuscates the truth of what really went down, that was a problem. That was absolutely a problem. So we'll figure that out. And thankfully, the government, this is the part about government. So the other thing too, what I didn't realize with Australia, government and media are worse than the states. It is the worst place in the world because it's sport for them. When PwC had this problem, one senator made it a big issue as part of their campaign. We were at 30% of all media, not just CNBC, all media. So every citizen of Australia was against us. This is how bad it got in Australia. This is what I had to deal with. When our team showed up and got into an Uber, the Uber driver said, what do you do? And he said, oh, I work in professional services. He goes, as long as you don't work for PwC, I'll drive you to wherever you want to go. If you're PwC, get out of my car. And he was serious. The next day, the team of 5 people that I sent from headquarters down to Australia to help went out for a cup of coffee. There was a sign on the coffee shop, we do not serve PwC employees. Because the whole country was against us because this senator had worked behind the scenes with the media to make this an issue where we ended up being 30% of the media each every day. That then became another learning in terms of understanding when to raise your head, when not to raise your head. You saw my name because I got called by the Australian government to go testify. We chose not to testify, but it did stuff in other ways to make that kind of stuff happen. So those are the things you have to deal with again, different geographies and being on top of an organization across the world. So, I'm sorry, I lost track of your second point.
For the second point,
The second point was regarding your successor, the new global chair,
So
Mohammed.
we go through a lot. So every year, ever since I started, I was into talent management. I would sit down with the board and say, if I got hit by a bus or hit the lottery tomorrow, here's who's in my job next week. Here's who's in my job 2 to 3 years from now. And here's who's potentially in my job 5, 8 years from now. Mohammed was always on that list. We go through a thorough process. Again, he's one of these people, and there was one of many, where you have to give them different skill sets, different job opportunities. He was part of my leadership team. He ran our global advisory practice. He was born in Africa. He was schooled in France. He lived in Canada. He's lived in 11 different countries. So he's a globalist of nature. He's somebody that came to us via an acquisition that I did 11 years ago. And at the time, he was running Europe and Asia. He came through, so he was always high on our talent management list. He ran our deals and global advisory business before taking out my successful. And it's the first time we've had somebody not from the States and not from running a country, because they didn't run a country, run a global business. So we did something radically different that was done in the last 175 years. The Bahamas. He's going to be great.
Thank you, everyone. That's all the time we have for questions today. But before we wrap today's program, I'd like to invite President Nwosu to the podium for a special presentation.
Let's give Tega a round of applause. And Bob, would you mind joining me to the stage? And I want to extend my deep gratitude to Bob for speaking to us today on behalf of this university. And you indeed embody the qualities exemplified by our university founder, Edward Austin Sheldon. And in recognition of your exceptional leadership and service, and your commitment to higher education, it is my great honor to now present to you the Presidential Medal for Distinguished Leadership and Service of the university. Let's give him a round of applause as well. Thank you. Let's give Bob a standing ovation.
Two messages before I make it. One, to the students in the room, and to your friends that are not here today. You are in a place that's super special if you make it special. You are in a place that will plant the seeds for your future. And you have much more opportunity and are better positioned than I ever was. And for me to do all the things that I've done, that just tells you the world is yours to take. Just make sure you go out and take it. Do something with it, take advantage of it, take advantage of the opportunities you're given, and make this world a better place. To the faculty, to the teachers, a huge thank you for all that you do. I know it's not easy, the world's changing on you, you got to deal with a lot of different things, a lot of different challenges, but there's nothing but opportunities. Push yourselves as well. As you think about how to learn yourselves, how to educate differently, what kind of skill sets are really differently needed, and take advantage of those to better position the students that are coming into your classroom so they are, back to that youth comment, the future leaders that we want everybody to be, and the leaders that we need as we look ahead. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Congratulations, Bob. Could we please have another round of applause for our distinguished man? Thank you all for attending, and we hope to see more of you during this historically forward university. Okay.